Once upon a time, in a land far away, there lived a king and queen who longed for a child each day. One winter, as the queen was sewing by the window of snow, she pricked her finger and saw 3 drops of blood flow. She wished for a daughter with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. Soon after, her wish came true, and she named her Snow White. But sadly, the queen died shortly after giving birth to the child. The king remarried a woman who was beautiful, but vain. She had a magical mirror that she consulted every day. She asked the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror always answered, "You are my queen, the fairest of all." The queen was pleased with this and thought no one could surpass her beauty. Snow White grew up to be a lovely maiden, kind and gentle. But the queen grew jealous of her and plotted to end her life. She ordered a huntsman to take Snow White to the forest and kill her, and bring back her heart as a proof of the deed. The huntsman took Snow White to the woods, but could not harm her. He told her to run away and never come back, and killed a wild boar instead. He brought the boar's heart to the queen, who thought it was Snow White's, and ate it with salt, thinking she had rid herself of her rival. Snow White ran through the forest, scared and alone, until she came across a cottage that seemed to be empty. She knocked on the door, but no one answered, so she went inside. She saw 7 little beds, 7 little chairs, 7 little plates, and 7 little spoons. She was hungry and tired, so she ate a little from each plate and drank a little from each cup. Then she lay down on one of the beds and fell asleep. The cottage belonged to the 7 dwarves who worked in the mines all day. When they came back in the evening, they saw that someone had been in their house. They looked around and saw Snow White sleeping on one of the beds. They were surprised and curious, but they did not wake her up. They waited until she woke up by herself, and then asked her who she was and what she was doing there. Snow White told them her story and how the queen wanted to kill her. The dwarves felt sorry for her and offered her to stay with them if she would cook and clean for them. Snow White agreed, and they all became friends. The next day, the queen asked her mirror again, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" But the mirror answered, "You are fair, my queen, but not the fairest of all. Snow White, who lives with the 7 dwarfs, is 1,000 times more fair than you." The queen was furious and realized that the huntsman had tricked her. She decided to take matters into her own hands and kill Snow White herself. She disguised herself as an old peddler woman and made a poisoned apple. She went to the cottage where Snow White was alone and offered her the apple. Snow White remembered the dwarf's warning and refused to take anything from strangers. But the queen showed her that the apple was harmless by cutting it in half and eating the white part while giving the red part to Snow White. Snow White was tempted by the apple and took a bite, but as soon as she did, she fell to the ground as if dead. The queen laughed wickedly and said, "Now you fairest of them all, Snow White, but only in death. She ran away and asked her mirror again, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror finally said, "You are my queen, the fairest of all." The queen was satisfied and thought she had won. When the dwarfs came back, they saw Snow White lying on the floor with the poisoned apple in her hand. They were heartbroken and tried to revive her, but it was too late. They could not bear to bury her, so they made a glass coffin for her and placed her inside. They wrote her name on it and kept watch over her day and night. Sometime later, a prince was passing by the forest and saw the glass coffin with Snow White in it. He was struck by her beauty and asked the dwarfs who she was and what had happened to her. The dwarfs told him the story, and he felt a great love for Snow White. He begged them to let him take her with him and promised to honor and cherish her. The dwarfs were reluctant, but they saw the prince's sincerity and agreed to give him the coffin. The prince thanked them and ordered his servants to carry the coffin to his castle. On the way, one of the servants stumbled on a tree root and jolted the coffin. This dislodged the piece of apple from Snow White's throat, and she coughed it out. She opened her eyes and saw the prince looking at her with joy and wonder. He said, "Snow White, you are alive. I want to marry you. Will you?" Snow White was amazed and said, "Yes, I will." The prince lifted her out of the coffin and took her to his horse. They rode to his castle, where they had a grand wedding and invited the dwarves as their guests. They lived happily ever after, and the queen, who heard of their happiness, died of rage and envy. And the mirror, who had seen it all, said, "Snow White and the prince are the fairest of them all."